All right, welcome to Frank Teaches DevOps. All right, my lovely viewers, I must commend you for all you do in promoting the good works. All right, so in today's video, we shall look at Ingress Controller. All right, setting up an Ingress Controller on a Kubernetes cluster. All right. So in this context, I have used EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes Service on AWS. Right. So we shall be seeing how to set up um, um, an Nginx, specifically an Nginx Ingress Controller. So this is the topic for the day. Before we go into the nitty gritty, let's quickly look at what's an ingress controller. Okay, so an ingress controller, as the name implies, is usually a load balancer for routing external traffic to your Kubernetes cluster, and is responsible for layer 4 and layer 7 network services. So we have been told that an ingress controller in short term is a load balancer, right? Load balancer that is responsible for routing traffic to the internet. All right. Okay. And it talked about layer 4 and layer 7. And down here, it says ingress controllers only cover layer 7 traffic, while ingresses route HTTP and HTTPS traffic. So there are two things here. We have ingress controller and an ingress. Ingress controller is the load balancer which operates at layer 7, which is the application layer of the OSI referencing model. So load balancer exists in this this layer of the OSI model. Then ingress is the object, all right, in a Kubernetes cluster that routes your HTTP and HTTPS traffic. And we are told that ingress they run on layer 4, which is the transport layer of the OSI model. So on the transport layer, we have two major protocols, which is TCP and UDP. All right. So this is everything about ingress controller. So in the next slide, we shall look at different types of ingress controllers. There are two major kinds of ingress controllers. We have the cloud-based ingress controllers, and we have the open source based ingress controllers. All right. So for the cloud base, we have the one from which is AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, Application Gateway Ingress Controller, AWS ALB Ingress Controller, and GCP GLBC GCE Ingress Controller. So these are all cloud-based ingress controllers. If you need to set up if you need to allow make the cloud, okay, if you need to use the cloud to manage your ingress services, all right, then the next on the list is the open source based ingress controllers. So in this we have different technologies. We have Voyager, F5, HA proxy, Istio, Kong, Nginx, Skipper. All right. So now in this video, we will be using what? Nginx Ingress Controller. Nginx Ingress Controller. So if you can see from our caption, how to set up an Nginx Ingress Controller on EKS. All right. So we're gonna set everything up, and it's gonna work like magic. Okay. Then yeah. So let's now explain what we are about to do. Now, originally, when you set up a cluster, a Kubernetes cluster, and you create your services, you deploy your services, your applications, your pods, you also deploy an associated service with to those pods. And if you need to expose those services to the internet externally, is either you set up the service type as a node port or a load balancer. Now there are three types of service type. We have cluster IP, we have a node port, and a load balancer. All right. Now cluster IP implies that communication between the pod communication can only remain within the cluster, right? With cluster IP. Now with node ports and load balancer, your services gets to be exposed externally, all right, with node ports and load balancer. However, there's a drawback with node ports. Node ports mean with node ports, the only drawback with node ports in this context is that the port keeps changing each time the service restarts. Your services restarts. So if you do a new deployment or you restart the service, it implies that your port to the service is going to change. So and your URL, all right, your service that's been accessed externally will no longer be available. All right. So that's a drawback with node ports. Now, but with load balancer, your service will remain the way it is. However, load balancers are expensive. You won't want to go the route of assigning every service a load balancer. Every service a load balancer. Assuming you have 200 services, it means that you're going to deploy, you're going to set up a corresponding 200 load balancers for each of those services. It's a no-no, right? Yeah, that is why we've come up with the concept of Ingress controller. So the Ingress controller is going to set up a one load balancer. That one load balancer, all your services is going to lie behind the load balancer. So this is what's going to happen. All right. So you have the ingress managed, which is if you're using a cloud, all right, then it's definitely it's going to create a load balancer for you, load balancer. Then this load balancer is behind the ingress, which is the object. This ingress runs in the cluster. You can say this is my cluster, Kubernetes cluster. This is outside of the cluster. So the ingress is an object in the Kubernetes cluster. So the ingress, you define your routing rules, right? The routing rules that will route traffic to your services, all right? To your services. And your services will now route those traffic to the pod. So your service and the pod already have a corresponding service, all right? So this is the whole picture, okay? This is the whole picture. The last on the list is this, but it's just something similar, all right? But this is now specific to Nginx um, uh, Ingress controller. So from this setup, we have a cluster, all right? In the cluster, we've set up different services, service one, service two, three, four. Now, this service, they have their corresponding ports, right? This is the port two, port three, and port four. Now, the Ingress controller, you set up the Nginx Ingress controller to route traffic to back and forth back and forth of these services, right? So this is just the architecture. You can also use this to marry what we are trying to depict here. All right. So to wrap it up, an ingress controller is usually a load balancer for routing external traffic to your Kubernetes cluster. So in the next slide, we will see how to set up this ingress controller. Now, setup. Now, before we go ahead setting up this ingress controller, it's expected you have already set up the below. You have a running cluster, all right, and you set up deployment with corresponding service. Okay, so I have a running cluster, kubectl cluster info. So I have a running cluster and kubectl gets node, a running cluster with two worker nodes, all right, with two worker nodes. Okay, all right. So now I need to set up deployment with corresponding service. So let's go there, and now I have a YAML file which I've set up already. So in this YAML, I'm going to explain. I'll be creating a namespace called demo ingress. All right. So here's my deployment. So in this deployment, just a demo app, namespace in demo ingress, all right, demo app, just simple. It's a simple application. So this is just simple application. Then the corresponding service for this deployment. Here's the corresponding service. So this service is demo. This service name. It also runs on the same namespace, and it uses runs on port 80, and the type is cluster IP. Okay, so I'll quit this and do a cube apply dash f deploy. So if I check my service, get all in namespace demo ingress. So demo ingress, I have my service up and running. However, this service type is what cluster IP, meaning that I can't access this application from the internet. So for me to be able to access this application from the internet, I have to change this to either a node port or a load balancer. So kubectl edit service. So let's do that. Edit service. But okay, let me just do it directly from here instead of, let me change it back to what let me say a load balancer. A load ba- balancer. So this load balancer is going to get deployed directly. So if I say apply, then what else? Get all. Let's see. So now I now have an external IP. All right. So if I copy this load balancer as it is, copy it, copy this load balancer, come to the browser and hit it up there. Okay. We're coming. Just one sec. Let's go to EC2 instance. All right. It takes time to propagate. The load balancer takes time to load balancers. We should see the load balancer we just created. All right. Okay. So this is the load balancer we just created. All right. So we don't have any. Okay. So let's check. This is the load balancer. Let's check the application. So this is the application to that load balancer. All right. This is the application. So this application, if we need to set this load balancer behind a domain name, let's do that right away. Let's just create a domain name and assign this load balancer behind a domain name. So I'll go to my route 53. I'll go to route 53. I just want to show us something before we get started with Ingress. All right. So I just want to show us that our application is up and running. So let me go and create a domain URL. Let me call that this create a record. So a record, let me just say demo dash app. All right. Dot this. Then I'm going to create an alias. An alias will be for application load balancer. The region is island region. Then the load balancer, I have to paste my load balancer here. So this is my load balancer. All right. That's my load balancer. Then click on create record. So the moment I click on create record, let me search for that domain name. Demo, this is the demo name. So if I copy this domain name, I go to my browser and I hit enter. I hit enter. So let's see. So you can see I can access my application on that URL. Okay? On that URL. So this is just a normal situation where we get to create load balancers. We get to expose our service as load balancer. Now, I said something earlier. What if I have hundreds of services? Does it mean I'm going to create hundreds of load balancers? Load balancers are expensive, all right? They're expensive. So for that reason, we will be using what? Ingress controller. So the ingress controller is going to create for me just a single load balancer. it's going to create for me a single load balancer. Now, on that single load balancer, I'm going to load balance my services, all right, through what? The ingress, through the ingress object, all right, through the ingress object. So now let's delete that load balancer. Let's change it back to cluster IP. So go back to our deployment, change this load balancer back to cluster IP. All right, escape, save and quit, then redeploy, apply. Now check, get all. So load balancer is gone, right? It's now what? Cluster IP. So if I go to my AWS, I will still have this guy. Sorry, my session just got expired. So as you can see, I no longer have that load balancer. It's no more. All right. I no longer have that load balancer. So if I also refresh my domain, everything is gone. If I refresh, it's gone. All right. Because I've changed everything to what? To cluster IP. All right. Great. Now let's set up. Let's go back to our. We have seen set up the cluster, set up the deployments with corresponding service, which is up and running. Now we need to install what? Nginx Ingress Controller. So to install Nginx Ingress Controller, we'll go to the official document for Nginx Ingress Controller. So it's on Kubernetes. This is the URL. Okay, kubernetes.github.io/ingress nginx deploy. Okay, so I'm going to look for AWS. So this is AWS. So now this guy is going to create for me. Okay, let's just go ahead. Now this is the step. Just follow it as it is. It's two ways. It's either you download the deployment file, which is here, or you can do it. Okay, just do get. So or you can just run it directly from the URL. But it's best, according to the documentation, that you download the deployment file and you make some changes. So these are changes that we need to do. So the first phase is download this deployment file. After downloading it, you edit it. All right. So, let's just start. So I'm going to copy this file. I've copied it. So I'll go to my cluster. Though I have a file called deployment.yaml. All right, so let me change it. Um, let me move this deploy to um, to app deploy dot yaml. All right, to app deploy. So I have my app deploy dot yaml. Now I can now do my wget and paste what we have. So great. So I now have this deploy.yaml from Nginx. So I've downloaded it. So the next step now says edit the file, change the VPC seeder in use for Kubernetes cluster. So in my Kubernetes cluster, my VPC in use is Frank VPC EKS. My VPC in use is Frank VPC. So EKS cluster, where's that VPC? Okay, let me go to the VPC. So VPC in use. So they say we should edit this. We'll look for proxy real IP seeder. So replace it with my VPC seeder. So my VPC is Frank VPC, and the seeder block of my VPC is this 10.this.this. So copy this guy. I've copied it. Now go to this file, open deploy.yaml. All right. So now I'm going to search for proxy dash real. All right, in that file. So /proxy. So here the line is. So in this line, I've seen it. In this line, you make the changes. All right. So paste your your VPC seeder. All right, it has been pasted. Once that has been pasted, so the next step says change the AWS certificate manager ID as well. So I'm going to copy my AWS AN. All right, I'm going to copy the AN. So I'll go to my certificate manager. I will look for certificate manager. I have some certificate there. All right, so I still have one certificate that was issued. So this is the and they need me to copy. So I'll copy this and I've copied it. Now come back here and search for ACM. So search for ACM. We should see that. So this is this line they want us to change. Let me set the line number. Set NU. So line number 363. They want us to change this line 363. Okay, so paste what you just copied. So I've pasted it. So I'm deleting that which was there originally. That which was there originally. So now we have uh we've set up this. So let's go back to our documentation. So we have now changed the certificate manager ID, which we just did, which we did. That's great. So the next thing we need to do is deploy the manifest. So we should deploy it. So go back, save. Those are just the two things you need to change. Now deploy it. Cube apply dash f who deploy.yaml. So if I hit enter, this should create for me everything. Everything was created. So this is on let's look for the namespace. kubectl gets namespace. So the namespace is Ingress Nginx. All right. So kubectl get all in namespace Ingress Nginx. All right. So let's see what we have. So great. So this by now should, can you see the controller? So the Ingress, Nginx Ingress controller has already deployed a load balancer. So let's go back to our AWS and see if we have that load balancer. So if I refresh my page, I now have this load balancer. So this load balancer is coming from Ingress. So if I copy this load balancer, take it to the browser, paste it, and hit enter, it takes some time. It will come up. It will come up. It takes some time to provision. All right. So this is what we have. So far, we've been able to use this documentation to set up an ingress controller. All right. So the next on the deliverables, which is step two, will be set up the ingress to route HTTP and HTTPS traffic. All right. So now let's do this, which is number two. Okay. But still, let me still check. We should have Nginx. It takes time. It takes time. Is still provisioning. So the state is still what in provisional state. So it will change from provision state to what to active. Then we can access the load balancer. All right, the ingress controller. Okay, so everything is up and running. Everything is fine. Everything is fine now. Okay, so now the next on our step is to what set up an ingress to route HTTP traffic. So I have a skeletal ingress which I have already set up. So this is the ingress.yaml. So I'll open that ingress.yaml file. So if you see from our diagram, from this diagram, we are through with this load balancer. We are now in this phase, which is was the ingress. So we want to set up what? Create the routing rules. Creating the routing rules. So let's open this guy. So now the name of the ingress will be, let's just call it demo ingress. Namespace. Namespace is very key. The namespace of your ingress and your services has to be in the same namespace. The namespace, understand, the namespace for the ingress and the namespace for the service has to be the same namespace. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you have to do it like that way. Because if you don't do it that way, your routing might not work. Okay, so the namespace I've used is demo. What's it? Let me check those namespaces again. Let me check those namespaces. CTL get namespace. So we have demo ingress. So demo ingress is a namespace. Demo ingress is namespace. So the name of the ingress, you can just keep it demo Nginx Ingress. Now, the ingress class name is Nginx. This is your rule. So HTTP path type is prefix, path is forward slash, the backend service. So the service name, all right, I'm going to look for my service. Okay, let's look for the service. So kubectl get service in namespace demo ingress. So this is the only service we have, demo app service. So this is the name of our service, okay? And the type is cluster IP. So go back to the ingress. So the service name is demo app service. Then the port which this service is talking on is port 80. That's all. Then we need to set the host. All right. So the host, if you remember, we created a domain name called demo. We created this domain called demo app. So copy on route 53. So copy that demo app. Okay. Copy it and set it up there. So this is your host. Okay. So this is your host. All right. So we are all set. All right. So the host is this name, and the service you're targeting is demo app service. Then the port which that service communicates on is port 80. All right. So now let's escape and save and quit. Now we need to what? Create the ingress. kubectl apply dash f ingress. So the moment we do this, let's see, it's been created. Now let's check. kubectl get ingress. All right, in namespace demo ingress. So we have an ingress with this name. The class is Nginx. The host is already this host. The address has not been assigned so far. The port is port 80. Let's check that again because it just get created. Let's see, no address yet. All right. So now let's describe this ingress. So kubectl describe ingress in namespace demo ingress and the ingress name. So here is the ingress name. Here is the ingress name. Let's see if everything goes well. Okay, now perfect. Okay, this has been assigned. So there is the address. It has picked the load balancer from what? From the what's it called? From the controller, for the ingress controller. All right, and yeah, I think this has been assigned. This service has been assigned. Is all going well. So let's check our load balancer. Let's refresh our load balancer and see. It should be done provisioning. Great. So it's HTTPS. Let's proceed. Great. Now we are hitting what? The load balancer. Now let's try to hit on our domain name. Where's our domain name? Our domain name was what? What was the domain? So this is our domain. This is our host. So when we did get ingress. So now an address has been assigned. So this is our domain name. So copy this domain name, copy it, come to your browser, hit enter. We are going to get nothing, right? Because it's not routing traffic yet towards the load balancer is not behind this domain name. So we are going to set the load balancer to be behind this domain name. So what we'll do, we'll go to AWS, all right, copy the load balancer. So here's the load balancer. Copy this load balancer, go to route 53, route 53. Here's the route 53. Okay, you go to route 53. and you look for the domain name, hosted zone. Go to hosted zone. You go to what was that? This. Then you look for that domain name demo. Right. So this is the demo app. Right. This is wrong. The previous load balancer. So I'm going to edit this record. All right. I'll change this load balancer. I'll put this my load balancer from the Ingress controller. I'll click on save. So the moment I click on save, this is fine. Now come back to your domain, refresh. So the moment refresh takes some time. Let's see, it will sync. Let's check back here. We've done everything fine. It's supposed to fly. It's supposed to fly. Describe. It's supposed to fly. It's going. The host is this. App demo. It's supposed to fly. All right, let's wait. It takes some time. So it's now coming up. So you can see it has sync. It has what? Sync. So this is how you set up an ingress controller. This is, my lovely viewers, this is how you set up an ingress controller from start to finish on AWS EKS. So let's just wrap it up, guys. Let's wrap it up. So you can see I can now access my application. All right. So if you see from my diagram, the routing rules. I created this ingress controller, which creates for me a load balancer. Here is the load balancer. All right. It's been created. All right. Then let's go back there again. Then in my ingress, here's my ingress. Let's show us our ingress one more time. Cat ingress. So this is my ingress. Okay. Remember, the namespace of the ingress and the service has to share this. Your services, and your ingress has to share the same namespace. It's very key because if anything changes, you might have 503, error 503. All right, you might have error 503. So to avoid error 503, temporarily unavailable, you have to set um, same namespace for the ingress and your services. Okay, so this is it, guys. This is the host, nothing much. Okay, then the service and Vala, we are up and running, and this is us. This is us. So far so good, guys. We've been able to set up a full-fledged, all right, ingress ingress controller using Nginx Nginx Ingress Controller from start to finish. Don't forget, this is the URL. This is the URL. This is the URL. I'm keeping it one more time. This is the URL, and you have to slash AWS. I went here, AWS, and this Nginx Ingress Controller uses a network load balancer. All right, it uses a network load balancer. So far so good. And this, sorry, I didn't mention the certificate. The certificate is required so that we can launch, we can have a secure application. So that's why we needed that certificate manager. All right, that's why we needed the certificate manager. I think that's all, guys. That's all. And I want to officially thank my lovely viewers for your support, and pleading that you should kindly like, leave your comments, share, and subscribe to our channel. So thank you, and see you in my next video. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.